Physical and Medical Sciences. Theme 2, Organizational Change, Mitigating Limitations for Capacity Building. And the title is Faculty Training and Development for Transformational Education. I am Dr. Altaf C., Assistant Professor from Lodz Institute of Engineering and Technology, Hyderabad, India, and I'll be your moderator for today. Let me introduce our speaker, Professor M. Zahid Bashir, sir, who is graduated in the year 1986 from King Edward Medical College. He earned fellowship of Forensic Medicine in 2014. He has over 30 years of valuable experience in the field of medical education. He has been a passionate, caring teacher with result-oriented steady vision. He has over 25 publications and international paper presentation to his credit. He has also participated in numerous educational courses, workshops, seminars, conferences, and he has many more achievements. So I'm happy to introduce him to all my attendees, and I request Professor M. Bashir, sir, to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Altaf. I had planned this session as a workshop, but it appears that it's a webinar, so it will be more less interactive, and it probably will be a one-way thing. I wonder how many people are attending this session at present. Do we have an idea? Altaf, can you tell me?
No, sir, not yet. I'll check and I'll inform you.
All right. So I'm Professor Zahid Bashir. As Dr. Altaf said, I'm a graduate of King Edward Medical College in Lahore, Pakistan. This is one of the oldest institutions in the subcontinent and in the country, of course. I'm presently working as a professor of forensic medicine at Shalimar Medical College. It's a private sector medical college in Lahore. And currently, I'm also the principal of the college, which is an administrative position. I graduated in 1986 and then did my fellowship in 2004. So started teaching in 1988, so around 35 years of teaching experience. In addition, I have an interest in education, and I've done courses on education and faculty development and things like that. And I've been asked to speak on faculty development. That's something that I have a responsibility of as the head of the institution, and we'll be talking to you about my experience in faculty development and what I think, how faculty development should take place, what are the barriers, what are the plus points in faculty development, especially in developing countries, and what are the catalysts for this, and how do you then evaluate faculty development programs in your respective institutions. So first, the topic is faculty development for transformational education. And we have to understand what transformational education is, what transformational means, and what we need, what sort of faculty development initiatives we need in order to implement this transformation in education. So transformational means the ability to produce a big change or improvement in a situation. This is the Cambridge Dictionary definition or meaning of transformational. So when we're talking about transformational education, we mean that we want to bring about a big change or a big improvement in education. Now, this is something that will be contextual and will vary from institution to institution and will vary from region to region and country to country. So everything that you do and everything that we will be talking about today is something that will be totally contextual. So you will have to do things according to your own situation, according to your context, and according to the situation in your own organizations. And then is the training of faculty to bring about the desired change in education. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to define what change we have to bring or we intend to bring in education in our institution. Once we've defined that, we can then come into what sort of training or faculty development has to be initiated in order to bring about that change. So the first thing, of course, is what change you want to bring into education. And as I said, I had planned this as a workshop, and this was our first activity. So I thought that we would be a group of participants, and people would brainstorm as to what sort of transformation they want in their institutions. Because that's not possible, so I'll move on to the next phase and discuss or detail what sort of transformations people are looking at around the world. So if we look at the educational scenario, we will find that the people that we're training today are people who will be practicing maybe 10 years down the lane. And therefore, their requirements will be something that will change over time. And with technology and with the social media and the internet developing and changing very rapidly, this entire scenario of clinical practice and clinical education and basic science education is something that will change very rapidly. And this is something that we have to adapt to. And this is something that we have to train our students to practice. So if we look at the six common attributes or competencies that have been identified by the various healthcare systems, we look at a knowledge base, which means that our graduates or doctors of the future have to be knowledgeable in their own specialties or in their own areas. Then they have to be skillful, and they have to have the right attributes or the right behaviors. This is something that's sometimes taken in as professionalism. So they have to have the right knowledge, the applied clinical skills, how to approach their patients, and they have to have the right attitudes. In addition to that, there are three other things that are coming up in various guidelines. And this is the ability to communicate better. And this communication can be interpersonal communication with their peers. But more importantly, it is communication with the patients. And we all know that a lot of problems in clinical care come from a lack of communication. So it's important that our future doctors develop good communication skills, especially in difficult situations where the patient becomes critical or something of that sort. Then two other things that are the need of the future doctors is the ability to manage things. So we talk about community leaders or managers, and then we talk about leadership qualities. And in addition to that, we also talk about the creation of new knowledge, which means the ability to do research and not only just disseminate knowledge, but also to create new knowledge. So these are the six things that are common in the ACGME, the CanMeds, and the WHO when they talk about 5-star doctors or 7-star doctors. These are the common attributes that they talk about. So summing them up, the attributes of a medical graduate should be that he should be knowledgeable, skillful, he should have the proper professionalism, proper behaviors, and ethics is something that is coming up as a strong point in training and teaching of our future graduates. So that's something that we have to develop in our curriculum, and the faculty has to be trained to cater to that. Then they have to be scholars and researchers, good communication skills. They have to be managers and leaders. They have to be health advocates. And then they have to develop the ability to improve their systems, the systems of healthcare. So they should be able to develop policies and procedures. And all these attributes are something that we have to train them for. And in order for them to be trained, the faculty has to be trained in all these areas. And as I discussed before, the AME guidelines speak about the medical students will be practicing medicine a decade after they begin their studies, and we need to prepare them to meet the largely unknown future. So we have artificial intelligence coming up, we have virtual reality coming up, and virtual classrooms. People are talking about virtual medical schools, and people are talking about transnational or international students and international medical schools and international faculty. So the curriculum then has to be modified to cater to these international or transnational needs, and that's something that the faculty should be prepared for. And because all these technologies, the future is something that's hidden from us. What changes will be coming in are not something that we can totally predict. We have an idea of some things, but what will happen 10 years down the lane is something that nobody can really predict. So because of that, we have to develop the students who can adapt to these new ideas and adapt to these new developments. And they can only adapt if they have attitudes of learning and continuous improvement. And they have to have the ability to continue their educational process throughout their professional life. And we all talk about lifelong learners. So these people have to be lifelong learners and have to adapt to the changing environment. And as I already said, there will be increasing use of technology, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality. And the technology, we know that is now changing at a very rapid pace. And what is current is something that will change in about 8 years' time. And as we move, it's a snowball effect. So as we move in time, this transfer of technology or this change in technology becomes more and more rapid. And we've seen this in our own lives. You look at the first mobile phone that came in, and that was about 20 years ago, and look at the type of technology that is now present in mobile phones. They have changed the entire way we communicate. It's not only possible to communicate through voice, but through text, through pictures, and the world has shrunk. And now this, I'm sorry, and now this mobile technology is being used for healthcare. It is being used for education, and these are things that are going to change the way we educate our students and the way we train our students. Then the healthcare system is something that is undergoing a rapid change because of artificial intelligence. Presently, things in radiology and histopathology are being converted, and they're reporting their images through artificial intelligence. And some recent studies also indicate that the use of artificial intelligence makes less errors than human beings. So in time, what we're looking at is artificial intelligence replacing humans in many fields in healthcare. So as far as imaging interpretations in histopathology or in radiology is concerned, then artificial intelligence is also being used to predict the possibility of somebody going into a septic shock in an ICU, or somebody who may develop a cardiac problem is something that can be predicted with artificial intelligence by looking at the echocardiograms and the ECGs. So these are things that we have to prepare our students for. And if the students are going to be prepared for this, then of course they're going to be prepared with the faculty, by the faculty, and the faculty then has to sort of master these things. And especially technology and artificial intelligence and virtual reality, we all know that the younger generation is more adept to this. They're more tech savvy, and therefore the younger faculty can be helpful to train and make the senior faculty more comfortable with the use of these technologies. So this was the second group activity, and we would have liked to have the participants to spend some time on. First, we asked them to spend some time on looking at what sort of doctors they want, what sort of educational changes that they want. And then this was an activity that would have asked them to delineate or to outline the faculty development initiatives that they would like in their own institutions. As I said, the faculty development is something that is entirely contextual and is entirely dependent on your own local context, your own local situation. So it will depend on the type of faculty you have. It will depend on the resources and the different things that you're using. But what sort of faculty development can take place and what the world is looking at is something that I'll talk about in the next couple of minutes. And during that period, we can look at what would be contextual in your own environment. So what is faculty development? It's any planned activity that improves an individual's knowledge and skills in areas considered essential to the performance of a faculty member in a department or a residency program. And usually people talk about teaching skills or assessment skills, but what is important is that the faculty development includes not just teaching skills or assessment skills, but it also includes administrative skills, research skills, and clinical skills. Normally, we leave the clinical skills to CME programs that the faculty chooses by themselves. But what is important is that these clinical skills, improvement in clinical skills, is something that should be taken up by the institutions, because the institutions have a stake in improving the clinical skills. And again, we know that the clinical skills, somebody who joins in as a senior house officer or a senior registrar or at that level, has some clinical skills, especially surgical skills or things like that. And over time, if these clinical skills are not improved by a robust faculty development program, what will happen is that your institution will have a group of faculty members who move from junior positions into senior positions and have not upgraded or updated their clinical skills. So when we all know that people who were trained maybe 20 years ago had very little skills in laparoscopic or endoscopic surgeries or endoscopic procedures. Now what's coming up is robotic surgery, and unless those skills are developed and actively developed by the institution, the faculty will be lagging behind. And if they don't develop those skills, of course, we all know that they will not be able to transfer those skills to the undergraduates or to the postgraduate residents. Similarly, teaching is something that is changing over time. And we all have seen that during the COVID period, when everything went online, institutions that had not foreseen this, had not seen this coming, and had not trained their faculty for online teaching, took a lot of time to come up to a stage where they could implement online teaching, and therefore they lagged behind other institutions. So these are skills that, again, the younger generation will be more adapt to, will be more comfortable with. But as you move up the ladder, you have to polish your skills and learn these technical gadgets and develop those. Then as you move up the ladder, your roles as a faculty, they change. So at a junior level, you are being governed by senior people, but so slowly and steadily you move into those administrative or into leadership roles. And during that period, you then have to develop skills that help you in running or in managing your department or your faculty or your institution. So you have to develop skills like human resource management. So with time, you will be managing a larger number of people, and you have to see how best to manage that human resource. Then when you move into an administrative role or into faculty deanship role, you will also have to look into finances of your department or your faculty or your dean position, or sometimes your the entire institution. So you have to develop or learn how to manage or how to financially manage your department. Then within these roles, you will sometimes be managing projects, and you will have to learn how to manage a project. So project management is something that you will have to learn. Then research skills. Most of us, especially in the medical field, are comfortable with quantitative research methodologies, but we lack qualitative research, for example. And these are some things that you will learn over time, and you have to keep yourself updated, because it's only when you are a master of these skills that you can transfer them to your undergraduate students or to your postgraduate students. Another way of defining faculty development is that it's the personal and professional development of teachers, clinicians, researchers, and administrators to meet the goals, vision, and mission of the institution in terms of its social and moral responsibility to the communities it serves. So here again, we see that it's not just teachers and clinicians, but it's also researchers and administrators who need professional development and who need to develop themselves to changing or evolving roles in their institution. And this definition again comes from AME Guide 30. And we know that the medical curricula are changing, and in developed countries, of course, things like patient safety, ethics, and community development or social responsibility are things that are established in modern curricula. But this is something that's coming up in underdeveloped countries, and these are getting more and more importance. So I'd like to talk about ethics, especially because what the dilemma that occurs is that you include this in your curriculum, you start teaching your students about the principles of ethics and research ethics, and especially clinical ethics. But we all know that in medicine, one of the most important things for teaching and training students is role modeling. And when they are taught something different in theory, and they see the role models behaving in a totally different manner, that creates a conflict in the minds of the students. So we have to ensure that before we start a curriculum in ethics, the faculty has to be not only knowing what ethics is and what clinical ethics is and what the behavior should be, but they should actually be a part of their personalities, and they should be responsible enough to practice what they teach, and therefore that's something that's important. Patient safety again is something that's coming up in different institutions recently, and this patient safety is coming up because studies have indicated that more people die because of medical errors than die because of poisoning or because of road traffic accidents, and patient safety is now becoming a part of curriculum in modern institutions. And this again is something that the faculty has to know and practice patient safety, so that when you teach your undergraduate students or your postgraduate residents, they see that all these things are already being practiced in there. clinical scenarios and in their research labs and in their practice. Now, how do you approach or how do you start a faculty development program? The first thing, or usually Khan et al. Have described 6 steps, and they've divided these 6 steps into 3 phases. So the first phase is planning for that faculty development. The second is implementation, and the third, of course, is evaluation and feedback. So the planning stage is very important, and it's important that you involve the faculty in planning for a faculty development program. And it's important to involve the faculty because you have to develop a faculty development program that meets the requirements of the faculty, because if it is something that's not connected with the faculty requirements, it is something that will not go forward and will not be successful. So the first thing that you have to do in step 1 is you have to identify problems and you have to do a general needs assessment. So you can do a survey or a questionnaire, and you identify from your faculty what areas they want to develop. And this is something that we planned as an exercise in the beginning of the presentation. And if it was a more interactive workshop style sort of thing, we would have been able to do this planning or practically implement this planning stage or a needs assessment from our participants. Then there is a general needs assessment that is something that's valid for all faculty or most of the faculty. And then you have to do a needs assessment of target participants. So the needs of different groups of people may be different because they will be in different roles and they will be in different levels of their careers. And there will be different departments. So the Department of Pathology, for example, may have a different need than the Department of Surgery. And you have to see what different target faculty, what their needs are. And then you have to define or you have to develop a program according to that. And it's important that every plan that comes up has specific measurable outcomes. So unless you develop these outcomes, the interest of the faculty will not, or the buy-in of the faculty is something that will not happen. And the interest or will not develop. And once you've developed this plan as to what sort of faculty development is needed and what its outcomes would be, so where you are presently and where you want to be after this faculty development program is implemented, that has to be very clearly defined. And then you have to develop what educational strategies would you use. So these educational strategies are as wide as you can think. So you can have workshops, you can have seminars, you can have conferences, you can have a community of people who group together and act as mentors and mentees for one another. Then you can have one-to-one interactions where a senior person or a more experienced person links with a junior person and sort of coaches him and or her and develops these traits that are needed in him or her. And then there is the final implementation phase after you've defined what different educational strategies. And these educational strategies are something that will, again, depend on your own context. But what's important is that it should not be a one-off activity. It should be something that reinforces the basic concepts time and again. And it should be something that is acceptable and something that is convenient for your target audience. So if you have a workshop and then you put in your educational material online or into a dashboard where people can come back and take help from that educational material at their own time, at their own convenience. That is something that is very helpful, because if you look at why people are not able to participate in faculty development programs, one of the reasons is that, of course, they're busy people and it's difficult to find time. So you have to make educational strategies that are convenient for them and they can easily participate in them. And of course, the last step is the evaluation of the effectiveness of the program and feedback. Uh, this is the most difficult part, and usually it's a quantitative evaluation that is something that's easier to do. So you can evaluate the faculty development program by seeing how many people participated in that program, what their feedback was, did they like the program, what were the positive points, what were the weak points in that program that they took part in. But the most important thing and the most difficult thing is the evaluation of the impact of that faculty development. And that impact, because it is something that takes a long period of time, so the impact can come in the form of better quality of teaching or better quality of patient care. So that's something that needs time, and it's a longitudinal sort of a thing. So most of the literature that covers evaluation of educational faculty development programs really concentrates on the quantitative aspects, and the qualitative aspects. Of course, it can happen with surveys and with questionnaires and with one-to-one talks, but that's a difficult thing. And the impact, of course, in quality of teaching improvement or quality of clinical care improvement will happen over a long period of time. And within that period of time, the faculty can change, the leadership of the institution can change. And so things sometimes are not totally in your control. But some of the evaluation that has been done on a longitudinal basis, the results that are coming up are very positive. And the general consensus that's developing is that a good, well-run faculty development program ultimately leads to better quality of students in terms of their knowledge, their skills, their attitudes, and in terms of their suitability for the profession. And it also results in better quality of clinical care. So that's something that's coming up. But this, as I said, is the most difficult of all the phases that you in your approach to faculty development. So I think we'll take a few minutes of break here, about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back further with the next phases of faculty development. I hope that's okay, Dr. Altaf?
Yeah, sir. Fine, sir. Sir, we have
All
two
right.
queries here.
All right.
I'm posting it in the chat box. Sir, can you please make host as Mazam sir as the host?
All right. The chat box is we have Dr. Sadia Shehzad. Mazam Zaid wants to make me a host, please. So are there any other queries?
Yeah, just a minute. Sir, the question is,
Yes.
how can we develop leadership qualities in our faculty other than organizing and conducting workshops or sessions? I'm
Other
repeating,
than
sir.
workshops, other than workshops and sessions.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So, of course, leadership is something that people think is there are two views on that. So there is one concept which says that leadership is something that's innate. So you have to have some innate qualities, and then the other concept is that it is something that you can learn over time. So if I look at my own self, I think in workshops and sessions can give you an outline on what leadership is and what the different forms of leadership or what different types of leadership are. But I think one of the most important things to develop leadership skills is mentoring. So, and role modeling. So if you get an opportunity to work with somebody who has leadership qualities and you're a keen observer, that is the best way you can learn leadership. So if you have an opportunity of working with a dean, for example, or a vice chancellor, or the head of the department, and you work closely with him, and this is somebody who is a good teacher as well, and you can interact with that senior person more openly, then you can talk to him as to why that person is acting in a particular way and why has he risen to that position. So I think if you ask people, for example, at the top levels, as to why they are able to handle a lot of people or manage a lot of people, you will see that they are usually people who facilitate people or help people. So leaders are always people who help their team to grow. So these are things that you will pick up when working with somebody, and of course you can interact. So workshops and sessions are good, but I think working closely with somebody who's in a leadership position and who is a good leader is something that is the most helpful. I hope I've answered your query.
Sir, one more question from Sundu Siftakari, sir.
Ji.
He's asking that how can we evaluate the outcomes other than survey questionnaires or focus group discussions? Can we evaluate whether our programs has brought about behavioral change in the faculties or improved their performance at their workplace?
As I said, usually you can do it with a pre-test, post-test thing. So you can have assessments of whatever outcomes you intended to, and you can have a pre-test on those outcomes and a post-test that gives you an idea. But as I said, the ultimate outcome of your faculty development program has to be that the quality of teaching improves, which can you can evaluate by the quality of students that are you're graduating. So if it's a central university or a national level accreditation body, and your results start improving in that, or the performance of your students starts improving, that's something that gives you an idea of better outcomes. Similarly, in clinical skills, I think if the quality of care improves in your institution, and that quality of care improvement, you can of course get feedbacks from your patients and from their attendants, whether not only the clinical skill but the behavior of your faculty has improved. These are some things that you can get an idea about the effectiveness of your faculty development program in terms of the outcomes that you intended to target. So Altaf, any other questions, Dr. Altaf?
Yeah, we have, sir, but we can continue with the session. We can go ahead with the question and answer session later on.
All right.
One more small request, sir.
Right.
Can you please make for Mozam Zahid sir as the host?
I wonder if I
You,
can do that
you
because,
are the host for the Zoom meeting.
all right.
Uh, you can check the participants,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, I can make Muslim the host. All right. Do you
Thank
want
you,
to
sir.
change the host to Muslim? So as I've said, yes. All right. So
Thank you.
is he the host now?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Got it.
Thank you, sir. We can continue, sir. I
All
have two
right.
more questions. We can continue with the question and answers later on.
All right.
Okay.
So we were talking about the six steps approach to faculty development, and we talked about three phases. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the levels of faculty development. As we already said that the faculty development has to take place at different levels, which means that somebody who's entering into an institution needs a different menu of faculty development. Somebody who's at a mid-level needs a different, his needs are different or her needs are different, and you have to target your faculty development according to the needs of that person. Similarly, somebody who moves into a leadership position has a different level of faculty development or a different need of faculty development. And at the same time, it also depends on the roles that your faculty is playing. So somebody who is at a teacher and a researcher would need, in addition to the basic faculty development in teaching and assessment skills, would need more faculty development in research skills. Somebody who is a clinician would need faculty development in his or her specialty and so on. So I'd show you this slide. It's a sort of a busy slide. I think you'll have to read it a little carefully. I'll just brief things about this. So if you look at the third column and you look at it says level of faculty development and who this is targeted to. So the first level is the orientation, and this is new academic staff entering the faculty. And what this person needs is to know about the policies and procedures of the institution, where he or she can get help, what are the requirements for promotion, what are the HR requirements, and how he or she can get a grant proposal coming up. So these are the requirements for somebody who's entering into a new role, entering at a junior level. Then at the second level are generic skills for teachers, faculty, and community preceptors. And at this stage, what you need is to learn about theories of learning. You need to know about interactive teaching, principles of assessment, and what's new in medical education, for example. So these are people who've sort of settled down in their roles, and this person may have come from a place where, for example, problem-based learning or case-based learning was not something that was practiced. And if he or she is going to do problem-based learning or case-based learning in your institution, then this is somebody who has to be trained for that and who has to be sort of targeted into this new role. And then you also have to learn about the principles of assessment. How do you assess? Because assessment is something that really drives learning. So, and an assessment has to be a valid and assessment so that it is fair and it is uniform throughout the course. And then as you move on and you become a clinical teacher or an administrator or a researcher as your prime responsibility, you then have to have faculty development targeted on learning in the clinical environment. And in the clinical environment, it's important that ethics or clinical ethics and how to interact with your patients and how to ethically do clinical practice and do clinical research is something that you have to develop and you have to learn. So ethical and effective use of patients for teaching is something that you have to learn. Assessment and feedback in clinical teaching is something that clinical teachers should be targeted to. Those who move into administrative positions need to know how to effectively manage their domain or their area of influence, and then have to know how effectively lead their places.
So, sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yes.
Your slide is not visible, sir.
Slide is not visible. Let me.
Only one slide is there. That is level of faculty development.
So this has not come up.
Levels of faculty
All right.
development.
Let me do this again. I'll share
Yes.
the screen again. So can you see this now?
Yeah. Now it is visible.
All right. So I'll just recapitulate the whole thing. So this slide defines the level of faculty development on the left side. I hope you can see my cursor as well. And then it defines who this is meant for, what sort of people this is meant for, and what sort of activities are or should be planned for this group. So we look at people who've just joined the institution, new academic staff, and they would look at socializing into the institution and how they can get the various facilities that are available into the institution, write grants, where funding opportunities are available. So these are things that somebody who is coming into the institution. And any orientation session, of course, will depend on your recruitment cycle. And whenever, usually institutions have recruitment cycles, for example, a quarterly cycle, and you can schedule this activity at that time. Then there are generic skills for all teachers, all faculty, and this would include theories of learning, interactive teaching, principles of assessment, and what new things are coming in medical education as far as teaching and learning is considered, or assessment is considered, or medical education research and scholarship is concerned. So these are things that are the next stage in faculty development. Then for clinical teachers, people who are working purely on the clinical side and residents, they need to learn about how to teach in a clinical environment, how they should interact with patients, because that is where the bedside teaching especially takes place. Then they have to learn about ethical and effective use of patients for teaching, and assessment and feedback in clinical teaching. And sometimes you can also use simulated patients or for clinical teaching, and how to effectively train those patients is something that clinical teachers have to learn. And as you move into administrative positions, you have to look and learn about effective management and leadership. If you're going into research, of course, you have to know what research is, what research methodologies are, research ethics, and you now have to learn both qualitative research and quantitative research. Qualitative research is something, of course, that happens more in public health, but now is something that takes place on the clinical side as well. So the faculty on the clinical side has to learn these as well. Then educational scholarship. So those who have chosen teaching as a career, they may be clinical educators or medical science educators. So they have to learn on how to publish, how to write grant proposals, and managing research funding. Again, research funding, once you get it, you have to have an insight into financial management. And even while writing a grant proposal, you have to know how much money you can spend on, for example, recruitment of people, on travel, on entertainment and everything. And these are things that you will learn as you move into the development of writing grant proposals. And then when you move into educational administration or leadership, as a dean or associate dean for medical education, as a curriculum committee chair. You will then be developing policies and procedures, and developing policies and procedures has its own protocol. There are methods of writing policies and procedures. How do you change a policy, and how do you document that change in policy, and how do you develop your organizational structure, your human resource organogram. That's something that you have to look into. And of course, if you are going to run a project, and that project can be as little as developing your skills lab, or developing a new operation theater, or developing a new ward, to developing an entire institution. So these are things that you learn as you move up the ladder. And it's only if you learn these that you can effectively implement these and effectively become or come into a leadership role. All right. I think you've so can everybody see this slide? I moved on to the next slide.
Yes, sir.
So this is again an insight into what faculty development, how it develops or how it moves on. And the first stage we've already talked about is something about orientation to the institution. Then is teaching and conducting research. You have to know about the tenure track if your university or your institution has a tenure track system where usually people are on small contracts or tenures, 2 years, and then when you meet the requirements of a tenure track faculty, which of course includes contributions to teaching and learning, contributions to research, and institutional development, then you can apply for a tenure track, and that's more of a permanent or a long-term contract that you develop with your institution. And during this time, you also develop professional networks, because especially if your institution is something that has an integrated curriculum, it's important that you develop professional networks across the entire institution, because whenever there is a horizontally or a vertically integrated curriculum, your network across the horizon, both horizontally across your own disciplines, and vertically with things that are taught with other at later stages or earlier stages, it becomes important, because the guidebooks or the case scenarios that are developed are developed in multi departmental teams, and therefore this professional network becomes important. Then it's important to keep up with increasing technological changes, and you have to develop ways of how to integrate technology into the instructional experience. You have to develop the use of technology in assessments. That in many institutions is a huge challenge. People developed online teaching relatively easily, but developing online assessments was a challenge in a lot of institutions, because there were challenges of plagiarism and challenges of misuse of technology. So that's something that people have to be a step ahead of your students. Otherwise, they will always be ready to play with you, sort of. And as far as integration of technology is concerned, you should always use your IT department, the information technology department in your institution, because these are people who are experts in the use of technology. So it's not necessary that it's only the Department of Medical Education or the Department of Education that takes part in faculty development. So as far as technology is concerned, it's usually the departments of information technology or the Department of Library Sciences that get involved in teaching and development of faculty. Because even if you want for example, do research and you want to dive into the already available knowledge that is present, the Department of Library Sciences is the best place who can guide you and who can teach you into uh, how to sort of uh, the intersect or integrate the required material. Because with this explosion of information, we all know that the information is unlimited, and getting into the right sort of information is now becoming a challenge. So the library science department can help you there. And then assessing student learning in a variety of instruction delivery modes. Assessment of students, of course, is something that's a science in itself, and very few people can really master this science. So if, for example, your institution is moving into programmatic assessment, that's something where the entire senior faculty who is involved in assessment should first master the skill of programmatic assessment. Similarly, things like directly observed procedural skills or mini CAX is something that's coming up in a very rapid way. And these are very effective tools for assessing students, and especially on the clinical side. And these are things that the clinical faculty has to be well versed with. Then this is again 5 categories of faculty development. And we said that we have to develop and innovate in teaching and learning processes, which is something, first, of course, you have to learn what is already there. And then because we have different contexts, everything is contextual. So the best thing is to adapt those innovations or those technologies to your own needs and to your own environment. So there have been studies where, for example, WhatsApp has been used for interviewing students. So during this COVID period, when it was not possible to get everybody on campus, WhatsApp or Zoom or other technological things have been used for interviewing people. And usually it's a larger number of people that you can interview in a day, and a large number of faculty. But then the faculty has to be trained in the use of these technologies, because it's not just an interview. Then they have to enter the scores. The interview scores have to be entered online. So these are things that you have to learn. Then development and innovation and communication and collaborations at different levels. We've already talked about that. These are multi-sectorial or multidisciplinary teams that are now working in teaching and training. Then you have to sustain faculty development programs. As we've already talked, that a one-off program is something that's not effective. So in order to sustain these faculty development programs, it's important that the leadership of the institution is involved, and they give not only the financial resources and the infrastructure resources and the space, but also invest in and have a buy-in in this faculty development program. So you have to be very careful, especially if during that period the leadership, for example, changes. Then the people responsible for faculty development have to sell these ideas to the new leadership and ensure that the faculty development programs continue over a sustained period of time. Because if there's a break and if this is not continuous, then that evaluation, that ultimate goal where there should be a change in your quality of teaching and the quality of graduates, and where the clinical service quality improves, that is something that will not never happen unless there is a sustained faculty development program running in the institution. Then we talked about education leadership and management and development of scholarship. So whenever people invest and get involved in teaching and learning, you then have to encourage them to do research and create new knowledge in teaching and learning. Teaching and learning as a science has developed over the past maybe 30 or 40 years, started in early 70s. And it's something that's still new. So there's a lot of new things that are coming up. As I say, nothing is permanent. And new methods of teaching are being challenged. Something that was acceptable 10 years ago and was being followed by a lot of institutions is now being challenged and is becoming obsolete, and new things are coming up. So it's important that innovation continues, and innovation continues in your own local context. So that's something that we have to sort of highlight here as well. And if you look at the literature in faculty development programs across the world, we see that the literature is primarily confined to improvements in teaching and learning and assessment. So these are two areas that are targeted again and again. And then there is some talk about scholarship or research. But there is very little talk about faculty development of people who are in leadership roles or who will go into leadership roles or in administrative roles. So these are usually not highlighted as essential components of faculty development. But the newer literature, the current literature that is coming up, places a lot of emphasis on development of leadership and management skills. Because if you don't have strong managers and strong leaders, the probability is that any continuation of your faculty development will always be jeopardized, and there will sort of be a sword hanging on this the continuity of this program. So we also have to have leaders and managers who understand the need for faculty development, and because without faculty development, the institution will not grow, and the institution will not move with times. And if it does not develop, if it does not grow with time, then what will happen is that it starts decaying, because everybody around you will be moving ahead, and you will sort of be stuck at the same place. So we've seen this in teachers and in clinicians, those who do not take active part in CME programs and in faculty development programs, are left behind the pack. So it's important that these are things that are very taken very seriously. And this is, again, an interesting concept of reverse mentoring. When we talk about mentoring, it's usually, we think that it is the senior people who can mentor junior people. So it's senior students who mentor junior students, or senior faculty who mentors junior faculty. But as far as medical education and as far as technology is concerned, there is a role of reverse mentoring, which means that relatively younger people who are more technologically savvy can mentor senior faculty or senior leadership positions. So this is interesting. So any new development is something that needs reverse mentoring. For example, if you endoscopic surgery, for example, is something that's coming up, has come up in a lot of places, and is coming up in the underdeveloped countries as well. So there, it's not necessarily that the most experienced person is the best person to teach and train you. So you can have some young person who's just been trained outside, and he can come back and train more senior people. So it's important that we don't shy away from this reverse mentoring role or this reverse mentoring concept, and this can sometimes become very effective. So we all know that when we were young medical graduates, we would learn from people from other fields. We would learn from the nursing staff in our own clinical setups. We would learn from technicians and technologists. So everybody has a role to play in fine tuning and in sort of giving finesse to you as a person, as a personality. So this reverse mentoring concept is something that can be used very effectively in faculty development. Altaf, can we take a short break and take some questions now before we sort of wind it up?
Yeah, I have sir, some questions for you. So, sir, you can look the chat box. I'm posting it there.
All right. There's a question that according to the need assessment of the faculty, the CPD program will be targeted towards the individual need of every department, or it will be one program for all. We discussed that. So you can have some faculty development initiatives or faculty development activities that will be there for all people. So any person, for example, who wants to come in as a faculty has to have some basic knowledge of teaching skills and assessment skills. So that is something that will be targeting all people who are entering an educational institution. But then there will be needs of individual departments. And you can have this at multiple levels. So you can have faculty development programs or initiatives that target all faculty. And you can have faculty development programs that are targeted to individual departments. So, for example, the Department of Radiology or the Department of Pathology can have specific assessment needs. Because these are largely images or not real patients, so they may have different needs in assessing people. So you can have a faculty development program for the Department of Radiology or Pathology, which is targeted to their own specific needs. So it works both ways. And of course, it's always important that you do an initial survey and ask faculty what where they are and where they want to be. So that will also give you an insight into what the faculty development needs of the institution are. And then you can sort of develop your program according to different groups. And you can group, for example, maybe 20 people need to improve their assessment techniques. There will be another 20 people who maybe need to improve their mentoring skills. And you can have one workshop or program that targets these 20 people who are looking forward to become mentors and want to develop their mentoring skills. There will be another program for people who want to work on assessments. And the assessment, of course, is, again, a wide area and a wide domain, and it can have different sorts of programs for different people. All right, the next question that I see is, in case of leadership change, how do you see the CPD program placed in, will be taken up by the next leader? So as I said, that no program can be successful unless the leadership has a buy-in. So usually people who move into leadership roles are people who understand that these faculty development programs are essential for maintaining and are essential for the continuous growth of the institution. So in most places or in most instances, you will not have major challenges But of course, every leader will have their own priorities and would like to influence that faculty development program into what he or she prioritizes. In that case, it's important that so what happens is that you have these groups that are responsible for faculty development, and these groups that they have their own long-term plans, and this group can then engage with the new leaders and convince them on the utility and the usefulness of the program that they've already developed. And of course, if you have evidence and you have done your homework in planning that faculty development program, I don't really see a major hiccup in the next leader not accepting the continuity of that program. But if of course, you may sometimes have to modify or adapt it according to the priorities of the new leader. And of course, the buy-in of the leader is important for sustaining that program. Then the next question is, what are the challenges in sustaining the faculty development program? We'll be talking about the challenges and the catalysts in a couple of slides, and what is the long-term and short-term impact of the program. We'll be talking about these two things in a while, so I hope I'll be answering these questions during the presentation, and we can come back to these questions after that. I hope that's okay with you.
Yes.
Altaf, can we move on?
Yeah, of course.
All right. So we talked about reverse mentoring, and the next thing we'll be talking about is impact on faculty development, projected impact on faculty development. Let's see if you can you see this now? Can you see this slide?
Yes, sir.
All
projected
right.
impact on faculty development.
Yeah, so these are major trends and driving forces in medical education, and the academics required by medical schools, and what faculty development issues take place there. So we see that there is an increasing globalization and commercialization of medical education. So if we look at Australia, for example, 40% of the medical students in institutions there are international students. And we have to look at what sort of curriculum we have to develop, because these 40% people will probably be moving back to their own countries after this. So there is a need to develop an international curriculum. So a core curriculum that is valid for the entire world or most parts of the world. And then that's the core curriculum.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yes, Altaf sir.
Slide is not visible, sir.
Not visible. All right, I'll share it again, and then I hope you can.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
So can you see it now?
Yes, sir. Now it is visible.
All right. So this slide talks about the impact or the need for medical faculty development. And it talks about globalization and commercialization of medical education, information technology, and patient safety. And it talks about the need for core international curriculum or competencies. And there is a need for increase in electives and global exchange of students. Then it talks about interprofessional education, because we all know that healthcare is a team effort. So people from different professions, you'll have nursing profession, you'll have people from the allied health sciences, technologists and technicians working with you. And you then have to work in these teams. So one concept is that if you have to work in teams, then you have to be, or you should be trained in teams as well. So this scope of interprofessional education is something that the faculty then has to be trained, because if you have a diverse group of people sitting and you're training a diverse group of people with different backgrounds, you have to be trained into how you can take the entire group together. Then we're talking about virtual medical schools. We already have virtual sessions, and there is now talk of, just like we have virtual universities, there is talk of a probability of virtual medical schools. So what will happen there? You can, of course, supervise the theoretical teaching, but how will you supervise the clinical teaching and the clinical training? Then there is the need for accountability and accreditation, and we've recently seen that it's become important that all institutions are internationally accredited. So now any institution or any accrediting body that is not accredited by the World Federation of Medical Education, their students will not be able to work internationally. So faculty has to know what these accreditation standards are, especially the leadership has to know these, and they then have to meet those accreditation standards. And then there are specialist roles for different faculty. We're talking about international assessors, clinical supervisors, people who are digitally competent. Then in any place where there are people coming from different cultures, the faculty has to be culturally sensitive, or transculturally sensitive is the more appropriate word. So if you are having people from different cultures, your behavior and your ethics has to be sensitive to all these different cultures. And there was a question about faculty development across all disciplines or particular discipline. And we see here that it talks about discipline-based faculty development is important. So it will, the different disciplines will have different needs, and that has to be catered to, and the faculty development program has to be tailor-made for that discipline. Then there is talk of credentialing of teachers and educators. So I'm sure you're all aware of the concept of credentialing. This started off with clinical practice. And the concept of credentialing is that once you're trained, you then have to give evidence of what clinical skills you can perform. For example, we know that people who've been trained in different setups develop a different set of skills, and that depends on the sort of supervisors they have. So if you're working in a unit where, for example, vascular surgery is something that's not being done, then somebody who graduates from that program should not be allowed to do vascular surgery. And if subsequently he or she wants to do vascular surgery, he then has to give evidence of training, evidence of experience, and evidence of having worked under supervision, and then only after a certain degree of experience of working under supervision would that person be credentialed to do a clinical procedure. So now they're talking about credentialing of teachers and educators and assessors. So it is people who are credentialed to teach a specific component. It is only those people who will be allowed to teach that. For example, somebody wants to teach neurophysiology. Now he has to be credentialed, because by training and by qualification and by experience as to whether he or she is good enough to teach neurophysiology. And this credentialing can be different for the undergraduate students, and it can be different for the postgraduate students. Because with postgraduate students or residents, it's not just teaching and training, but then you will also have to supervise their research proposals. And somebody has to be good enough to not only teach and train, but also to supervise their research. Similarly, the assessment is something that is a specialty in itself, and what sort of assessment you're good enough to handle is something you should be credentialed for. For example, when multiple choice questions came in, uh, you had to have these multiple choice questions developed by people who were trained in that. And when institutions left that to novices or new people, what happened was that the assessment was not proper because they were not assessing what they were meant to assess. So they were not valid questions, and therefore, although they were multiple choice questions, but they were not assessing the concepts and the things that you wanted to assess. So even if somebody has to develop a multiple choice question or an extended matching question, people will have to be trained and assessed and then credentialed that, all right, this person is trained and qualified to develop an assessment of a particular nature. All right, I'll start sharing again. And we've talked about this, that different people will have different roles, and the faculty development program has to be tailored to that. And these are the 4 different types of roles that have been defined. So in addition to being a teacher, which usually all faculty are, you can either be an administrator, an educator, a researcher, or a clinician. So again, some people would be confused as to why a teacher, educator have been segregated. So a teacher is somebody who is doing teaching, but educator is somebody who is trained as a medical educator. And so the newer concept that is coming up is that for all vertical movements or all promotions, all faculty will have to have some sort of qualification in medical education as well, so that they understand the basic psychology of learning, and they understand the philosophy of and the pedagogy of adult learning before they move into this domain. So if you're a chair or a residency director or a clinical director, you will have a different set of skills that you need to be trained in. If you're a director of education or a clerkship director, it's a different skill set. If you're a researcher, teacher, researcher, where your major role or your advanced work plan contains maybe 30 or 40 or 50% time spent in research, then of course your research credentials and your research capabilities have to be much above somebody who's a teacher educator or a teacher administrator. Then somebody who's a teacher clinician, of course, his clinical component and his ability to do clinical teaching and to practice ethically is something that he has to be trained in, and he has to develop his skills in that context. Then this is 12 tips for implementing a community of practice for faculty development. While talking about a change in leadership, we said that sometimes a change in leadership sort of hampers or can affect the faculty development programs. So this concept of community of practice is that people within the institution who have similar interests, they develop a community of practice. So they get together, for example, those people who are interested in assessments or a type of assessment, they get together, and they don't get together randomly, but the institution facilitates their getting together. And these people then work together on a certain aspect of faculty development. So they learn from one another, and then they can develop programs and they can develop faculty development initiatives that can be used to facilitate others. So whenever this community of practice is developed or is encouraged by the faculty, the dean of the faculty or by the administration, these are the 5 steps that take place. The first is that you gather a core group with similar interests to launch this process. And then when they get together, they have to articulate the goals and value of the community of practice. So they have to articulate and clearly define what their outcomes are, what they want to do. And then they should start with a specific task or a project. It should really be a problem that they should be targeting, because that keeps this community of practice focused rather than having diverse sort of things happening. So the third thing is that you start with a specific task or project, and you invite members with expertise and fresh ideas. So when you develop this community practice, it's important that you have people of different experiences. So you will have some people who have a lot of expertise, who've been around for a lot of time, and they have their own ideas. But then you have to have some fresh ideas who are young, who technologically more savvy, and they can bring in fresh ideas and fresh outlook into specific tasks or projects. It's also important to choose a facilitator. This facilitator, of course, is somebody who has the skills of becoming a good facilitator. He is somebody who's a team player, and he can keep the group focused, and he can facilitate their discussions and debates. And all the members of this community practice should realize and should feel that this community of practice is worthwhile, and it is useful not only for themselves, but it is useful, and the projects and the specific tasks that they're performing are useful not only for themselves, but also for the institution. Of course, institutional support is something that has to be there, and always is helpful in promoting sustainability of this program. It's also important that whenever this group successfully runs a specific task or a project, that success should be communicated widely throughout the institution and across other institutions as well, because that will develop networks where people with similar interests can get together and come together with this project and take that project further. It's important that this communication is online, is done digitally, so that it reaches a wider audience and people can access that information at their convenience. And then it's also important, like for any faculty development program, that this community of practice is also evaluated, and how this evaluation is done. We've already discussed that it can be through pre-test, post-test thing. It can be done on a longitudinal basis. It can be done by the perceptions of the people who take part in that, or who on whom that project or is run. And on a long-term basis, it can be a program evaluation or an institutional initiative where they see whether that project or that task that has been run has developed any change in the behavior of faculty or students, and whether it has resulted in an improvement in teaching and learning, or in assessment, or in clinical care. So we were talking about the barriers to faculty development. We'll first talk about some things that act as catalysts, or some things that promote faculty development, or promote the interest of people in developing themselves. Of course, the first thing is that people feel that there is personal and professional growth for themselves, and they've learned something new which has resulted in their own improvement. It's also important that workshop or session that is held is relevant to the teacher's needs. And this we talked about in the beginning, that you have to first involve the faculty and learn and know what the faculty needs. And any workshop that targets the needs of the faculty is something that will always produce better results. It will always have better buy-in, and it is always something that people will be interested in and people will be totally involved in. Then they should also feel that this is an opportunity to network with colleagues. This, of course, becomes important for junior faculty, where they have an opportunity to get together with more experienced and senior faculty and learn from them. This is also an important opportunity where you have integrated curricula and people from different disciplines, different levels of training come together, and they can develop these integrated curricula and positively and effectively run these curricula. And the other thing is that whenever the first opportunities or first faculty development activities that people participate in are positive and have a positive impact on them, such positive experiences will always promote ongoing involvement and people will continue with these faculty developments. So it's important that people who come in for the first time are people who are targeted, and they have to have an understanding and of the utility and usefulness of that faculty development experience. So that's something that's very important. Then we move on to some of the barriers. The barriers are clinical reality, which includes volume of work and lack of protected time. So this is important for clinicians, and it's important for the basic sciences as well. So in most places, what things are valued are clinical service and research. If we look at most of the promotion guidelines of different institutions, it's clinical service and research that are valued and that carry more weightage in their upward mobility. So in those cases, unless the institution, number one, gives protected time to clinicians and faculty so that they can invest that time into professional development, and also gives weightage to this faculty development in their promotion and appointment guidelines, it is only then that people will get involved and will see the value of these faculty development programs. Then there are logistical issues, and these are especially if you have an institution that has multiple campuses and you're running the faculty development at one campus at a central location. In order to overcome that, you can have two sorts of arrangements. One, you can have targeted faculty development at different locations, or you can have these faculty development programs run online, and these can be in real time, and these may not be in real time. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. So if it is not in real time, people can have that or get involved in that faculty development program in their own spare time. And then they can have a mentor or a guide with whom they can discuss those issues. And so we have to be sure that the faculty development program is run in such a way that it is convenient for a large number of people on the clinical and basic side of the faculty. Then there is a perceived lack of financial reward and recognition for teaching. So we already said that usually recognition is for research and clinical service. So your own institutional guidelines should have recognition for this faculty development and for teaching. So you should have programs where you can have the best teacher of the month or the best teacher of the year. And you can have financial incentives for quality teaching or quality research into teaching, or for quality development of assessment modules. And these, of course, will help in breaking this barrier to faculty development. And then there is a perceived lack of direction from and connection to the university. This also plays an important part if it's an individual department that's running the show and people feel that the university is not invested in that. Then people feel that if the top university leadership or the institutional leadership is not talking about faculty development and is not talking about teaching and learning, they feel that this is something that the institution does not value and does not weigh. So in addition to financial rewards and recognition of teaching, I think the top leadership should also be talking about these initiatives and talking about the value of these programs, and that will break these barriers of faculty development. Then these are some capacity development indicators. There was a research in the University of Tehran where they saw what faculty development programs were valued by faculty. I'll just show you this. I wonder if you can see this. Can you see this, or should I share it again? I think I'll have to stop this and share it again. So can you see this now? It's a bit crowded. It's a bit busy slide. So this is development and innovation in teaching and learning process, and this is the mean score of each process. So they had a large number of faculty from different institutions score what they valued in their faculty development programs. And I'll share this slide with you, and you can just go through this at your own free will. So we see that the higher scores are for things like enhanced competence to transfer concepts and skills to learners, improved competence to manage the classroom, competence to apply novel methods for assessing learners. So teaching and learning are things that are scored highly, and we've already talked about this, that all faculty development programs mostly talk about teaching and learning. And if you see the processes or the program that have lesser scores, there are some things like competence to do teamwork is something that people do not value, because that's something they value to an extent, but they prioritize it at a lower level. Similarly, encouraging and providing guidance to other colleagues to participate in faculty development programs is something that people do not rate very highly. And things related to teaching and assessment are things that are highly valued by faculty from different institutions. You can do a survey of this sort in your own institution, and I'm pretty sure that you'll have similar results. But as we've already said, that these new areas in faculty development or faculty needs are something that are coming up recently, and therefore maybe a few years down the lane, you will have people valuing these faculty development programs more, in addition to the teaching and learning and clinical care domains. All right. After this, we move on to we talked about the evaluation of faculty development programs. So this is an article that has looked at faculty development, the evaluation of faculty development programs in the United States over the last 50 years, from 1970 to 2020. And what they've concluded is that the complexity of evaluation, as the complexity of the evaluation increases, its use declines. So people are doing evaluations at a more initial level, rather than doing complex evaluations that need a longitudinal measurement. So measuring the change in teaching practice or student learning are things that are complex. They take time. So people you will not find a lot of literature about the changing teaching practice or change in student learning or in change in clinical practices. You'll find a lot of evaluations about participation numbers and the participants' self-report satisfaction. So you'll find a lot of literature about how many people participated in faculty development programs, on what type of faculty programs people were interested in, and how satisfied or unsatisfied they were with that program. So these are basically perceptions of the participants, and there's a lot of literature on that. Then increase in knowledge or skills of participants or a change in practice is something that is the next stage. It becomes a little more complex. So that's difficult to evaluate, difficult to measure. So that's something that you'll have less literature on. And then student learning or changes in the institution's culture of teaching is something that becomes even more complex, and you'll have lesser and lesser literature on that. Then faculty participation in professional development activities, if done well and positively, affect classroom pedagogy. It affects student learning, and it affects the overall culture of teaching and learning in a college or university. So these are things that have started coming up, that faculty development programs definitely have a long-term effect on student learning, on their performance, and on the clinical outcomes in the attached clinical facilities. This is something that has come out. And I'm sure that in the next 50 years, we will have more literature, and we will have a greater literature on long-term evaluation of these programs, especially those that affect longitudinal themes. So that's all from my end. I'm open for questions. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Yes, sir. We have 3 questions here. I'm posting it in chat.
So we have about 15 minutes for the question answer session, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
All
Here
right.
is the
So the first question is, can we assign different roles for faculty members according to the positive points? Not everyone can be a good teacher and administrator at the same. Very right. I think that's something that can be done. And what modern universities or modern institutions are looking at is different tracks for faculty. So you can have a faculty track or teaching track. You can have a faculty research track. You can have a faculty clinician track. You can have a faculty medical education track or a faculty research track. So depending on strengths of people. So a couple of years ago, what happened was that people were expected to play all these 4 or 5 different roles. So they would have to excel in teaching, in research, in clinical care, and in administration, and in faculty development. So people found out that that was certainly not possible, and everybody had his strengths and his weaknesses. So what happened was that people who were excellent clinicians, excellent teachers, but were not good researchers, sort of were left behind in their promotions. So people, what institutions have now done is that they've developed these educator clinician tracks. So people can excel in education and in clinical care, and have a minor role in research. So definitely you have to look at, so whenever you have a team, you have to look at their strengths and use their strengths. So if somebody is good in research, give him a greater role in research. Somebody who is good in assessments, give him a greater role in assessments. Somebody who's good in clinical care, use that positive energy and I'm sorry, that positive vibe that he has in clinical care, give him more time in clinical care, and cut down his teaching or research time in his advanced work plan. So what we do at our institution is that at the beginning of the year, we have this advanced work plan. We discuss it with individual faculty, and they come up with a proposal that I'll spend, let's say, X amount of time in teaching, X amount of time in research, X amount of time in clinical care. And everybody comes up with a different menu and a different plan. And we discuss with that. And of course, you also have to ensure the top leadership, departmental leadership has to ensure that all these different roles are met in the department. But within the department, different people can be playing different roles to a different extent. So that's something that definitely should be done. And good teachers are administrators. Again, you will have excellent teachers who do not have a knack for administration. So don't put them into administration. It's not necessary that the senior most person has to be the administrator of the department or of the institution. It is people who have the knack and who have the ability and who have the interest to do administration who should be put into those roles. You said that can we have promotions without a qualification of medical education? We had that until a couple of years ago, but now the newer trend is that you have to have some sort of qualification in medical education if you want to continue on a faculty track. So you can continue on a consultant track or a research track if you want. But if you want to continue as a medical educationist and you want to teach and train faculty, students and residents, then some sort of, it may be a qualification, it may be a number of workshops. I think I personally feel that's something that is the need of the day. The other question is, can we have a structured faculty evaluation program? Yes, you can have a structured faculty evaluation program. Of course, it will have to be structured according to the faculty development that you're instituting in your institution. That's something that can be done. Of course, it's a structured faculty evaluation program is an entirely different domain, and we can't discuss the details here, but it's something that can be done and should be done. The next question is, if tracks are allotted for faculty, would that also mean that promotion criteria will be different for each track? Yes, the promotion criteria would be different for each track. So it's something like you have these 4 tracks and you have to score, let's say 100 marks for a promotion. So depending on your advanced work plan, that 100 marks can come from different baskets, to say. So you can have a research, somebody with a research track can have 60% marks coming from research. Somebody who's on a clinical track can have 60 marks coming from his clinical service. Sometimes somebody who's on a teaching track can have 60% of his marks come from the basket of teaching. And the other 40 marks are according to whether he is on what sort of track he is, can come from other components. So yes, any person will have to attain 100 marks, but where those 100 marks come from will depend on the different track. The next question is, should we have individual faculty feedback sessions? Can you explain that? Individual faculty feedback sessions is feedback sessions for individual faculty? Is that what we're talking about? So you can put that in the chat box. But yes, you should have individual faculty feedback sessions. So what happens is that faculty is evaluated, for example, by their residents or teachers, and then that evaluation becomes a source of feedback to that faculty. So usually the departmental head gets that feedback, and then that feedback is discussed by the departmental head with that individual faculty. And it, of course, has to be discussed with a sandwich technique. You come up with the strengths of that faculty, that these are the areas that you have done well. And then you talk about areas that need improvement. And you end the session with, again, on a positive note. And of course, you have to give feedback to the faculty. And it's a continuous improvement process. What we did 20 years ago is something that we're not doing today. And that is because we got feedback from our peers and from our seniors as to what we needed to improve. And it's only with a positive feedback that you can continuously go on an improvement trajectory.
So we have done with all the questions, sir.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Altaf, and thank you, Mozam. It was a pleasure being here, and it was a pleasure talking to you both. And I hope the participants have their expectations have been met, and I hope their questions have been answered.
Sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.